Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into some incredibly fascinating source material that's basically going to dismantle a concept most of us rely on every single day. I'm talking about motivation. Now, fair warning, it might make you a little bit uncomfortable at first, just because it challenges a lot of what we're constantly taught about success. But honestly, understanding this is absolutely vital. We're going to break down the actual science of action, based entirely on some fantastic insights that cut right through all that modern noise. So let me ask you a question. Are you waiting for motivation? Seriously, we all know that universal feeling, right? You're sitting there waiting for that magic moment where you wake up completely animated, incredibly focused, and just ready to tackle the hardest tasks with this massive smile on your face. You tell yourself, you know what? Someday I'll wake up different. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is the day the hard work is just going to feel natural and easy. Okay, let's dive into this. That will never happen. I know. It's a really harsh truth to hear right out of the gate, but we absolutely have to shatter this illusion right now. There's no magical, perfect moment coming where hard work suddenly feels perfectly easy. If you're waiting for that feeling to wash over you before you start studying, or building a business, or getting in shape, well, you're going to be waiting forever. Which brings us to Section 1, the myth of motivation, and why waiting is wasting time. The stark reality we're pulling from our source material today is that almost nobody actually wins because they're highly motivated. Just think about that for a second. The most successful people in literally any field, they don't win because they have some endless supply of inspiration. They win because they've learned to act even without feeling the desire to do so. Let's actually contrast these two mindsets directly. First, we have the amateur mindset, waiting for energy, constantly negotiating with the alarm clock for just 5 more minutes, waiting for inspiration to strike before starting a project. Then we have the disciplined mindset, acting without feeling, strictly adhering to a predetermined system. The crazy difference here is that while the amateur waits for a feeling to arrive, the clock just keeps ticking. Time just passes. You sit there telling yourself you just need to find the right playlist or drink one more cup of coffee to finally feel ready. And unfortunately, while you wait to feel ready to change your life, well, your life remains exactly the same. So let's move into Section 2, the modern world trap and the theft of your attention. We really have to look at the environment we operate in today to understand why all of this is so incredibly hard. The fundamental problem is that our modern world has quite literally trained our brains to flee from effort. Every single piece of technology around us, from those infinite scrolling feeds to instant streaming, is completely optimized to deliver instant dopamine and quick pleasure. Over time, this literally conditions our minds to fiercely reject anything that feels like hard, unrewarding work. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can trace this specific downward spiral. Step 1, you feel a small discomfort. Maybe it's a really difficult paragraph to read, a complex spreadsheet you have to build, or just an awkward email you don't want to write. Step 2, you immediately seek a quick distraction, like picking up your phone to check a notification or just watching a super short video. And step 3, your brain learns to escape. Without you even realizing it's happening, your brain learns a very dangerous, deeply ingrained rule. It learns that whenever things get slightly tough, you just always choose the easiest, most entertaining path out. And that leads directly to the consequences. It's what this source text calls the invisible prison. Look at what happens to your perception when you wire your brain this way. Suddenly, studying feels unbearably heavy. Working demands entirely too much energy. Even reading a simple book is profoundly tiring. And building anything meaningful takes way too long. Because you've trained it to constantly escape into cheap entertainment at the very first sign of friction, your brain literally loses its tolerance for effort. You're left emotionally weak, trapped with this deep desire to change your life, but entirely lacking the emotional endurance to actually execute the steps. Which brings us to a major turning point in the source material. Section 3, discipline comes from repetition, action before feeling. This right here, this is the core thesis of our material today. Discipline isn't magically born from some sudden burst of motivation. It's born from acting repeatedly until the action literally becomes part of your identity. You don't just sit around and wait for the will to act. You act to create the will. It's exactly like physical training, but for your mind. You build the muscle by lifting the weight, not by thinking about how nice it would be to lift the weight. So the crucial point is this brilliant definition of confidence. Confidence is the silent proof that you can obey your own word. Man, this completely changes the game. Confidence isn't about standing in front of a mirror, hyping yourself up with cheesy motivational quotes. It's not about being the loudest person in the room. True, unshakable confidence is the quiet power of keeping promises to yourself, knowing deep down that you're going to execute even when you're completely exhausted and have absolutely zero desire to work. To build that kind of confidence, you absolutely must stop negotiating with yourself. Think about how often you hit the snooze button, bargaining for just a few more minutes of sleep, or, how often you decide to check social media just for a second before starting to study, totally convincing yourself you'll get to work right after. Our source material makes it abundantly clear. These are not just harmless little habits. These are small, daily decisions that actively strengthen your habit of escaping. They slowly destroy your potential and your life, one tiny negotiation at a time. To actually pull that off, we look at Section 4, the power of environment, and why we must simplify to focus. Transitioning into the practical application here, we have to recognize that human moods change constantly. You can feel 5 wildly different emotions in a single morning. Therefore, discipline cannot rely on how you feel. It has to become an automated system. And an automated system requires a strictly controlled physical and digital environment to protect you from your own fleeting feelings. Let's walk through the components of this discipline system. You wake up on time, you work at the defined hour, you study regardless of your mood, you act without a mental debate. People with truly strong mindsets operate exactly like this. They do not let their fluctuating feelings dictate their actions. If the schedule says they run at 6 a.m., they don't lie in bed weighing the pros and cons of running. They just put their shoes on. They don't transform every single task into a draining internal debate, because they know for a fact that the longer you think about starting, the exponentially higher the chances become that you'll just give up. And to make that system actually work, there's a strict imperative. Focus requires eliminating excess. You simply cannot build intense focus if you're living surrounded by engineered distraction. Trying to profoundly change your life with 10 open browser tabs, a vibrating phone on your desk, and endless notifications flashing in your peripheral vision is, frankly, impossible. A disciplined mind absolutely requires a simplified environment. Focusing isn't just about raw willpower. It's about aggressively eliminating the excess stimuli around you so that doing the hard work becomes literally the only logical option. Moving to Section 5, the price of growth, embracing discomfort. We have arrived at the hardest truth of the matter. We all eagerly want the results, right? The success, the fitness, the knowledge. But the source makes it undeniable. All transformation, all growth, all meaningful change inherently carries a deeply uncomfortable phase. There is simply no evolution without giving up your current comfort. You have to leave the warm bed to build the discipline. Evading that essential discomfort, well, that traps you in this cycle of stagnation. Same days, same habits, same results. When you constantly flee from the hard work, you start surviving on pure autopilot. There's no construction, no advancement, no forward direction. Deep down, you know you're wasting your potential, but you remain trapped in this silent cycle of procrastination strictly because you are avoiding temporary discomfort. You're trading long-term fulfillment for short-term relief, and it's a bad deal. We need to completely reframe how we view hardship. Discomfort is a signal of growth. We're so heavily conditioned by modern life to think that discomfort means something is fundamentally wrong, that it's this glaring red signal to quit and go back to scrolling. We need to flip that entirely. Discomfort is the primary indicator that you are finally evolving. Think of it like being in a gym. When your brain resists and your body complains during a difficult task, that friction is the exact moment you are getting stronger. The burn is the point. Let's move to our final section, Section 6, the 2 paths and the daily choice. Listen, changing your life doesn't mean you have to wake up tomorrow and magically become a flawless emotionless machine overnight. Actually, scratch that. That's just another myth that sets you up for failure. True change starts much smaller. It starts with the tiny, binary daily choices we make in the trenches of our everyday routines. It starts with deciding to push through the friction when it happens. Read a few pages. Start exactly there. Keep the promise. Execute the action. Train for a few minutes. Move your body. Ignore the fatigue. Do the absolute basics, especially on the bad days. Work focused for 1 hour. Lock in. Silence the distractions. Get it done. This relentless, quiet consistency is worth vastly more than some fleeting, explosive burst of motivation that's just going to disappear by tomorrow morning. And this brilliantly illustrates our ultimate takeaway with a truly powerful quote directly from our source material. What builds a person are the days they didn't want to continue, but did. That right there summarizes the ultimate price of growth. Your character, your discipline, your future, none of it is built on the days you felt amazing and highly motivated. No way. It is forged entirely on the days when everything inside you screamed to stop, but you pushed forward anyway. So, I'm going to leave you with this final ultimate question. Which path will you choose today? Are you going to continue to wait for a magical surge of motivation that we now know is literally never coming, staying trapped in the exact same routine with the exact same results? Or will you embrace the effort, stop negotiating with your fleeting feelings, and actually start building your discipline through action? The choice, starting right now, is entirely yours.